Hey everyone, welcome back to Buried Truth Project. Today we're diving into one of the most disturbing criminal cases in American history, the story of Ted Bundy, the charming serial killer who manipulated the justice system, escaped from custody twice, and continued killing while the authorities underestimated him. This isn't just a story about a murderer. It's a story about how charm, intelligence, and systematic failures allowed a monster to hide in plain sight. Before we begin, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our deep dives into history's darkest moments. All right, let's jump in. Let's start with something most people don't understand. Ted Bundy didn't look like a monster, and that's exactly what made him so dangerous. In the 1970s, Ted Bundy was handsome, articulate, and educated. He was a law student at the University of Washington. He worked at a suicide hotline. He was involved in politics, even working on a campaign for the Republican governor of Washington. People trusted him. Women found him attractive and approachable. He had what psychologists call superficial charm, the ability to seem warm, friendly, and completely normal. But behind that charming exterior was one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. Bundy confessed to killing 30 women between 1974 and 1978, though the actual number is believed to be much higher, possibly over 100 victims. Here's what most people don't know. Bundy didn't just kill. He studied his victims, stalked them, and refined his technique. He was methodical, intelligent, and absolutely ruthless. And he used the justice system's own assumptions against them. Bundy's typical method was shockingly simple but devastatingly effective. He would approach young women in public places, often wearing a fake cast on his arm or leg. He'd ask for help carrying books to his car or loading something into his vehicle. He played on people's natural instinct to help someone who appeared injured and harmless. Once he got them to his car, a tan Volkswagen Beetle, he would attack them with a crowbar or tire iron he'd hidden in the vehicle. He would then drive them to remote locations where he would assault and murder them. Some victims were never found. But here's what's truly chilling. Bundy kept returning to the disposal sites to engage in necrophilia and apply makeup to the corpses. He treated his victims like possessions, objects he could revisit whenever he wanted. The level of depravity was beyond what most investigators had ever encountered. Now let's talk about how he fooled the justice system, because this is where the story gets really disturbing. In 1975, Bundy was pulled over by a highway patrol officer in Utah for a traffic violation. When the officer looked in his car, he found handcuffs, a ski mask, rope, and an ice pick. Any reasonable person would see this as a serial killer's toolkit. But Bundy talked his way through it, claiming these were just items he happened to have in his car. He was arrested anyway, and eventually a survivor identified him. Carol Durange had escaped from Bundy months earlier when he tried to abduct her by pretending to be a police officer. She picked him out of a lineup. In 1976, Bundy was convicted of aggravated kidnapping and assault in the Durange case and sentenced to 15 years in prison. But here's where it gets crazy. While awaiting trial for murder in Colorado, Bundy was allowed to visit the courthouse library to research his own case because he was representing himself. During one of these visits in June 1977, Bundy jumped out of a second-story window and escaped. He was recaptured 8 days later, but the damage was done. He'd proven the system could be manipulated. But Bundy wasn't done. In December 1977, while being held in the Glenwood Springs jail in Colorado, he escaped again. This time, he'd been losing weight deliberately so he could squeeze through a small opening in the ceiling of his cell. He climbed through the ceiling, made his way to the jailer's apartment, stole civilian clothes, and walked out the front door. This escape was different. This time, Bundy disappeared completely, and while he was free, he killed again. Bundy made his way to Tallahassee, Florida, using stolen credit cards and fake identities. On January 15, 1978, just weeks after his escape, he broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University in the middle of the night. What happened next was one of the most brutal crime scenes in American history. In less than 15 minutes, Bundy attacked 4 women while they slept. He bludgeoned them with a piece of oak firewood. 2 of them, Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy, died from their injuries. 2 others survived but were severely injured. Less than an hour later, just blocks away, Bundy broke into another apartment and attacked Cheryl Thomas, fracturing her skull and dislocating her shoulder. She survived, but was left with permanent hearing loss and equilibrium damage. Here's what's terrifying. If the authorities had taken his previous escapes more seriously, if the jail's security had been tighter, if anyone had realized the danger he posed, those women would still be alive. The system failed them catastrophically, but Bundy's final victim would be his downfall. On February 9, 1978, Bundy abducted 12-year-old Kimberly Leach from her school in Lake City, Florida. He sexually assaulted and murdered her, then dumped her body in an abandoned pig shed. 3 days later, Bundy was pulled over in Pensacola for driving a stolen vehicle. When the officer ran the plates, Bundy tried to fight and escape, but he was finally captured for the last time. Now here's where Bundy's manipulation of the justice system reached its peak. He insisted on representing himself at trial. The judge allowed it, and Bundy turned the courtroom into a performance. He was articulate, confident, and used legal jargon fluently. He cross-examined witnesses. He made objections. He acted like a real lawyer. The media ate it up. Cameras were allowed in the courtroom for the first time in Florida history, and Bundy became a celebrity.
During the trial, something truly disturbing happened. Bundy proposed to former girlfriend Carol and Boone while she was on the witness stand testifying as a character witness for him. He asked her to marry him. She said yes, and under an obscure Florida law, because they declared their intent in front of a judge, they were legally married. Think about that. A man on trial for brutally murdering young women manipulated the courtroom proceedings to get married. And it worked. Boone later gave birth to a daughter, conceived during conjugal visits that technically weren't allowed. Even in prison, awaiting execution, Bundy was manipulating the system and getting special treatment that other inmates would never receive. But why did he get this treatment? Because he was charming, because he was educated, because he didn't look like what people thought a serial killer should look like. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If Bundy had been poor or uneducated or a person of color, he would never have gotten the same leniency. He wouldn't have been allowed to represent himself. He wouldn't have gotten media attention that portrayed him as fascinating rather than monstrous. He wouldn't have been able to escape twice from custody. The justice system failed because it couldn't accept that someone who looked and sounded like Ted Bundy could be capable of such horrific crimes. This is called the halo effect, when someone's positive qualities in one area make us overlook their negative qualities in another. Despite his manipulations, the evidence was overwhelming. Bite marks on Lisa Levy's body matched Bundy's teeth exactly. Witnesses placed him at the Chi Omega house. Eyewitnesses saw him abducting Kimberly Leach. In July 1979, Bundy was convicted of the Chi Omega murders and sentenced to death. In 1980, he was convicted of Kimberly Leach's murder and sentenced to death again. But even on death row, Bundy continued to manipulate the system. He spent nearly 10 years appealing his sentences, using every legal trick available. He offered to confess to unsolved murders in exchange for delays of his execution. He gave interviews where he blamed pornography for his crimes, trying to present himself as a victim of circumstance rather than a predator. In January 1989, with his execution date finally set and no more appeals available, Bundy began confessing to murders across multiple states. He gave detailed descriptions of killings, helping investigators close cold cases. But even this was manipulation. He was trading information for more time, trying to delay his execution by making himself valuable to investigators. It didn't work. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. He was 42 years old. Outside the prison, crowds gathered to celebrate, holding signs that said, "Burn Bundy, burn," and cheering when the execution was announced. But here's what we need to understand. Ted Bundy's story isn't just about one evil man. It's about systematic failures that allowed him to keep killing. The biggest failure was the lack of communication between law enforcement agencies. In the 1970s, there was no national database for tracking serial offenders. When Bundy moved from Washington to Utah to Colorado to Florida, he was essentially starting fresh each time. Different jurisdictions didn't share information effectively. Bundy killed women in Washington, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, Idaho, and Florida. Each state investigated their own cases independently. It took years before investigators realized they were all looking for the same man. If there had been better coordination, Bundy might have been caught after his first few victims instead of his 30th. The second failure was underestimating him because of his appearance and charm. Multiple witnesses had identified Bundy early in his killing spree. His girlfriend even called the police tip line to report him, saying he matched the description of the suspect. But investigators dismissed these tips because Bundy didn't fit their profile of a serial killer. They expected a monster. They got a law student with good manners. Their bias nearly cost them the case. The third failure was the security and legal system that allowed him to escape twice. Bundy should never have been in a position where he could jump out of a window or squeeze through a ceiling. The lack of security directly led to more deaths. Let's talk about the victims, because they often get forgotten in the Bundy narrative. The media was so focused on Bundy's charm and intelligence that the women he murdered became almost secondary to the story. These were real people with families, friends, and futures. Linda and Healy was a psychology major and a radio announcer. Donna Gail Manson was a 19-year-old who loved music. Janice was 23, newly married, working as a probation caseworker. Kimberly Leach was 12 years old, a child who should have been safe at school. They weren't just Bundy's victims. They were individuals whose lives were stolen, and the system failed to protect them. Here's the legacy of Ted Bundy. His case led to major changes in how law enforcement tracks and investigates serial crimes. The FBI developed the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, or VICAP, a national database that allows agencies to share information about violent crimes and identify patterns that might indicate a serial offender. His case also changed how we understand serial killers. Before Bundy, the public image of a serial killer was a loner, someone obviously disturbed and socially awkward. Bundy proved that serial killers can be charming, educated, and integrated into society. They can be your neighbor, your coworker, the helpful stranger offering assistance. But here's what concerns criminologists today. We've almost romanticized Bundy. There are documentaries, movies, and TV shows that focus on his charisma and intelligence. There are online communities where people discuss being attracted to him. We've turned a man who brutally murdered at least 30 women into a cultural icon. This is dangerous. It plays into exactly what Bundy wanted: attention, notoriety, and the perception that he was special or extraordinary. He wasn't. He was a predator who exploited people's trust and the system's weaknesses. So there you have it, the disturbing truth about how Ted Bundy fooled America's justice system. From his charming exterior to his brazen escapes, from his courtroom manipulations to the systematic failures that allowed him to kill for years, this case reveals how bias, poor coordination, and underestimation can have deadly consequences. What's the most shocking thing you learned today? Let me know in the comments. And here's a question for you. Do you think the media's coverage of serial killers like Bundy does more harm than good? If you enjoyed this deep dive into dark history, smash that like button and subscribe to Buried Truth Project for more untold stories. Thanks for watching, and remember, the truth is always deeper than the surface. I'll see you in the next one.